Welcome to the SFCCU Online Education Series. Today we will be covering the topic, understanding the philosophies, principles, and relevancy of credit unions. My name is Colin Bartholomew. I am a senior lecturer and head of department for cooperative studies at the Cipriani College of Labor and Cooperative Studies, and it's really a privilege and an honor to partner with SFCCU on this laudable, very, very laudable and admirable initiative put forward by its education committee. And once again, it's about edifying the cooperative movement and educating the cooperative membership. Now, a lot of people often ask, in terms of a credit union and how is it linked to a cooperative society. In essence, a credit union is what is termed a financial cooperative. So everything and anything you can learn about cooperatives also relates and applies to credit unions. So Cipriani College of Labor and Cooperative Studies is actually the college that specializes in the delivery of education for cooperatives and more specifically credit union education. Now, we believe in partnership. So of course, SFCCU within this era of adjustment and what is now being termed the new normal has opted to shift to this online platform. And as they term it now, you have migrated to the online delivery. And this evening session will be just about that. Now, when we are looking at the cooperative movement and what it does, it's important that we really emphasize within cooperative education that there's an underlying and underpinning philosophy. We must be cognizant of that. We must be wary of that. And you must always strive to embrace that which makes us different as cooperators and as a cooperative credit union movement. So just as we go into the presentation, we will begin with a video as to the philosophy and those philosophical underpinnings of the credit unions. Now, as you join us here on YouTube this afternoon, one thing, we are utilizing the college's platform. So I want to encourage you to like, to share, to subscribe to the college's YouTube platform. So of course, anything that we would be engaging in the future, you would be privy to that information and come on board as a cooperator. Fantastic. So don't forget to like, to share, and to subscribe. So let's get into it. Now, when we speak to the cooperative movement, people often ask, where does it come from? What is the background to this thing that, we are in? And some people just don't know and, just decide, well, it have a benefit in belonging to a credit union. So let's just enjoy the benefits. Not really knowing, where it truly began, where it started, and even the direction in which it is going. So to develop that foundation, one of the things that, we always look at is where it began. Now, cooperation is nothing new. Cooperation has been around from time immemorial, and it will continue to exist. Now, the thing about it is we look at cooperation and we think, in its structured, organized format, it's something that, maybe out of reach for us, is that we may not know that much about. But the reality is, every day we cooperate, whether it be with your family, whether it be with your work colleagues, whether it be with your fellow members of your credit union, however it is, even while traveling, you cooperate with the maxi driver, the taxi driver, your fellow passengers. Cooperation is essentially part of the human being because, as one saying goes, no man is an island and man cannot exist alone. So there's always a longing for that companionship. And the cooperative movement has embodied that element of collectivism, companionship, camaraderie, and collective responsibility. So there was an era where it was very, very difficult for mankind really to exist. And in the modern form, what essentially happened is that it began in an era known as the Fourth Industrial Revolution. And if you hear that pinging away in the back, we are we are in another industrial revolution. So messages are coming through as we are speaking. So I will make sure to minimize that noise so we will be able to share the presentation screen. All right. But before we begin, I just want to share on the Industrial Revolution.
In the late 1700s, most people worked in the fields on land they did not own. Those who owned the land, called aristocrats, lived refined lives in elegant manor houses. Servants raised their children and did their housework. The landowners and the people who worked for them depended upon each other. It was a system that had existed for centuries. In towns across England and the United States, a series of extraordinary innovations would alter the way people lived and worked for the next 150 years. Inventors had found new ways to harness nature's energy. They built new kinds of machines powered by water, steam, and coal. The new machines replaced hand-powered tools. They did the same work, only cheaper and faster. Much of the work was done outside the home, in specially designed buildings, the first factories. Mechanization began in the textile mills of England, where one machine attached to a spinning wheel could do the work of 50 people. Fuel, clothing, and food all became more affordable. With the development of locomotives and steamboats, manufactured goods could now be sold halfway around the world. Families moved from the villages of their ancestors to new industrial towns. And a new class of people emerged, workers who produced goods. Industrialists, the people who owned the factories, employed hundreds, sometimes thousands of people. and they made enormous profits in their industrial centers. But while the Industrial Revolution brought wealth to some and jobs for others, it came with a price tag. Pollution from coal-powered factories turned the cities black. Lack of housing created the first urban slums. And the demand for more and more goods and higher profits brought the exploitation of workers, including children. Some of the worst conditions were seen in the textile mills of New England. In the 1830s, a 10-year-old mill girl described her life.
We were paid $2 a week, and the working hours of all the girls extended from 5 o'clock in the morning till 7 in the evening, with 1.5 hour for breakfast and for dinner.
It was the hiring of children, some as young as 5 years old, throughout the 1800s and early 1900s, that outraged the public. Workers and reformers protested. They formed unions and associations and fought for government regulations to limit the workday and protect children. These laws helped address many of the abuses brought on by the Industrial Revolution. Today, we are in the middle of another revolution, a technological revolution. We live in what's called the global village, because we can connect with people around the world as if they lived next door. And we can now work anytime and anywhere. We will have to wait and see where this new revolution leads.
Always a very interesting video, and it's always one that I always seek to prop any presentation when we're talking about the cooperative movement, particularly the historical element, up upon. So it's very important that we build that base in order to move forward. Very, very instructive, very critical, and one that will guide, the information that we will receive here in this session. So, of course, if you have any questions, please feel free to post it in the chat area, and as well, you may also respond, or if you have any further questions, you can send it through the email which you received the invitation to this evening's forum. So we want to get into it. I know you would have some questions. I know you would like to engage. So as we go through, I will pause from time to time to see any questions which you may have, as well as be able to address them. So this evening, we really want to understand this thing we call the cooperative philosophy. Just let me do some housekeeping here. Nice. So as we enter the virtual realm, one of the things you always ask is is everyone seeing? But according to the technology, I am presenting now to everyone. So we get into that. Right. So of course this afternoon we're looking at the sorry about that. Yes. All right, so we're looking at understanding really the philosophies, the principles, and the relevancy of credit unions. And we started, with what was that first industrial revolution, and one of the gaps that exists between that revolution and today. I call it, the Gen X versus the millennial discussion, and now it's turning more X-shaped because Gen X, and then you go to the millennials, which is termed Gen Y, and now we have Gen Z, or which they call the Zers, those persons born from the 2000s, early 2000s, and moving forward. And of course, it's the year 2021. So the reality is someone born in the year 2000 would now be 21 years of age this year, which is basically an adult and a young adult. So in that 20-year gap, what would be the changes that would take place? How would you differentiate, the children of the 80s with their funky dress and hairstyles and, what they did to the people today? And, we look at the Industrial Revolution, and that video signaled something so instructive and so important as to, the conditions which arose out of the changes in society at that point in time. So those changes were jarring. Those changes were very disheveling to the people who existed at that point in time, and in particular because it was an agrarian-based societies. People were really engaged in agriculture for their livelihood. But then this, what they termed industrial revolution, arose. And people were forced, in a sense, to move from that traditional lifestyle into the new realm. And that's included, it may sound strange now, but you're talking about steam engines and steam powered vehicles. You're talking about like coals. You're talking about massive transportation systems. Those things were the technology of the day. And in so moving, the society had to embrace the people who existed, and vice versa. The people had to embrace the society. And of course, at the end of the day, the society won out because, society changed, and therefore it called for people to change. So they left their traditional lifestyle, came to city centers, and were faced with rampant poverty and just exploitation to the highest. So what did they do? They were forced now to come together. It's really a coming together of people, because the reality is children were working long hours, people lived in abject poverty, and they had to decide what they would be doing. Now this industrial revolution spanned what is considered a 200-year period, from 1700 all the way up to 1900, where it more or less normalized. And over that time period, in that industrial revolution, that first industrial revolution, people really adjusted, and to what was the technology of the day, and adjusted their lifestyles and livelihood. So it really called for a paradigm shift, as you would call it. And people struggled. because the children had to work. The children really could not go to school because in order to face the bills at the end of the month, basically everybody had to be working. And the reality is, it was new machinery. It's not like today where you have the occupational safety and health rules and laws and regulations, and that didn't exist. The reality is, because people had to earn a living, they faced exploitation. That was the reality of the day. That was the reality of the day. So, what caused this? And it's something so important and so relevant to, what we always discuss. The introduction of technology into society always impacts people's livelihood. It could be 1700, it could be 1900, it could be the year 2000, it could be the year 2020. The reality is, the introduction of technology impacts livelihood. So human behavior, how you earn a living, every single thing is impacted. So they had to look for a solution. What is instructive here is that the solution they look for, they found it in the collective structure. So the collective structure led to a resolution for the exploitation which emerged from this situation. And I mean, we are no stranger to it in our jurisdiction. I mean, just basically think about it. When you think about a susu, you know, the susu is really a collective coming to address individual issues, but really working through the collective to get it done. And there's even the new talk today of different forms of what they call susu type schemes popping up all over the place. And although I'm not I may not necessarily agree with those schemes, the reality is the principle is one of collectivism. Remember, this is important to build a foundation. The principle is about collectivism. People are finding comfort in the collective and coming together. And finance and money will always be an issue, because as society would have it, everyone needs money to live. So your credit union and that structure that has been established to address credit and other financial needs is rooted in what was impacting people on an individual level. And the modern form of cooperation and cooperatives emerged from this industrial revolution, the modern form. Of course, other forms existed before in tribes and clans, in early civilization. But as we got closer to where we are today, the modern form of cooperation emerged. And from that came the 7 cooperative principles. Now, the cooperative principles were really something that emerged from a group by the name of the Rochdale Pioneers. So this is also a video I would like to share. just to show the work put in by these guys known as the Rochdale Pioneers. Just taking a little while to start up here. You will see it shortly.
Cooperation is as old as humanity. And records exist for people working cooperatively right back to the 1760s. But the cooperative movement as we know it today began right here on Todd Lane in Rochdale. Life was hard in the 1840s. There were few jobs for the weavers, people were hungry, and life expectancy was very low. People were often in debt to shopkeepers, who sold poor quality food. This cooperatively owned shop was set up by 28 working people in 1844 who wanted to be able to buy honest food at honest prices. They saved up until they could afford to open a shop and transported their first goods by wheelbarrow all the way from Manchester. This group became known as the Rochdale Pioneers. They had butter, flour, oatmeal, sugar, and candles. The gas company thought the co-op shop would not be able to pay their bills, and so wouldn't supply them with gas. So the pioneers had to use the candles to light the shop the very first opening night at 8 p.m. on the 21st of December 1844. The Rochdale Pioneers were inspired by Robert Owen and used his ideas to create the Cooperative Values. Anyone could join the cooperative by paying £1, regardless of their religion, politics, or job, and each person had one vote. They sold pure goods, and the shop profits were shared with the members as dividends. After 1 year, they had 74 members, and by 1860 this had grown to 3,450 members and 6 new stores. The idea of co-ops was spreading across the country, and in 1863 the Cooperative Wholesale Society was formed, buying in bulk to supply stock to the growing number of shops. This became the Cooperative Group. Most co-ops had a reading room above the shop that members could use, as education was seen as very important for all. In the Rochdale Pioneers Cooperative, many men and women had their first opportunity to take part in voting, years before general elections were in existence. Women were welcome in cooperatives from the very beginning, given equal voting rights, and were allowed to sign for their dividend. A minimum wage was implemented in 1907, 90 years before becoming law in the UK, and cooperatives were often ahead of their time when it came to issues like pensions and working conditions. Workers at a cooperative factory in Crumpsall had a piano, library, and even a football club at work, and they were the first biscuit makers in the country to work an 8-hour day. Employees even got a wedding cake given to them by the factory when they got married. Cooperatives are famous for caring for their members, even looking after the families of soldiers by continuing to pay their salaries whilst at war and assuring them jobs on their return home. Cooperatives spread worldwide and now have 1 billion members. From bankers and grocers to snake catchers and taxi drivers, more than 120 million people now work cooperatively. From the introduction of the Fair Trade Mark in 1994, cooperatives have been committed to stocking fair trade products, helping to support millions of food growers in developing countries. The massive impact of the actions of those 28 people back in 1844 has influenced a global movement, a new way of living and working. The original shop on Todd Lane has been preserved as a museum, so you can come and find out about cooperation, share cooperative stories, and discover more about the Rochdale pioneers. Cooperation might be an old idea, but people are still recognising that cooperatives, built on the principles that the pioneers developed, are a great way of providing the things we need every day. And 1 in 5 people in the UK now belongs to a cooperative. From housing to food, schools to transport, there's a cooperative for everybody. So if you're not a member, why not join the global movement so you too can spread the word about cooperation? As we continue to work together to build a better world, it's our time to move towards a brighter, more cooperative future.
That's always a very interesting video, because tying it to basically what we spoke about, you would have seen that, it was a time where people were struggling, and where they came in really to address, the many issues that arose from, the struggles of the day. And, the Rochdale pioneers came in, and you would see there was that collective approach they would take, you know, the goods and provide it to the members. And coming out of their story of cooperation, you had the Rochdale pioneers. And as you would see, it changed the world forever, right? And they had principles on which they operated. And those principles became known as the 7 cooperative principles. Now, a lot of people belong to credit unions, a lot of people engage credit unions, a lot of people hear about credit unions and other types of cooperatives. However, they never are able to espouse the 7 cooperative principles, and they are displayed here for you to be able to become aware of this principled existence. And those 7 cooperative principles are voluntary and open membership, democratic member control, cooperation among cooperators, autonomy and independence, member economic participation, concern for the community, and of course, what we're doing here this evening, education, training, and information. So because people were really bombarded by the numerous issues, this was a group which, engaged the society at the point in time and developed principles to guide the solutions. So when you talk about voluntary and open membership, now with this principle, this is one of the early opportunities that people had to exercise their democratic rights. It's something that now we cannot take for granted. And over the years, we'd hear about the civil rights movement coming out of the United States of America. But predating that even was this move by the Rothschild pioneers to inculcate voluntary and open membership, right? And that led to what the practice is known as democratic member control. Democratic member control. One man, one vote principle. So you are free to come on board once you qualify for that membership, and then you engage in your democratic practice through democratic member control. You see, at the point in time, it was really about exclusivity and the haves and the have nots, you know, a 99%, a 1%. So it was really about, you know, bridging that gap and bringing more equality and equity to what exists. You know, it's important building a foundation. Then there was cooperation among cooperatives, and here you see there's a connection. So where I had one group establish itself into a cooperative, you did not want to be exclusive. The only exclusivity it would have is if you do not come into the wider body. But once you belong to that wider body, you could then engage another body that was similar in nature, that was principled in nature, that really was about what you believed in. The next point is autonomy and independence. So when you talk about autonomy and independence, it's really about, you know, you being an autonomous and independent organization as a credit union and as a cooperative. So during an example, let's say you have Cipriani College of Labor and Cooperative Studies. If a credit union comes out of the college, it's important to note that it is an autonomous and independent organization and free from any kind of internal or, I should say, external control. And it is autonomous and independent. And that was very important from a philosophical and principled position. So, whereas the SFCCU really came out of the San Fernando community, and over the years it has expanded into other communities. It resides there for the membership, for those members of the community who choose now to come into such an organization and exercise their democratic rights. It also gives the opportunity, because you know there may be other community-based credit unions. They provide the opportunity for collaboration, you know, cooperation among cooperatives, and as with everything else, no chamber, no nobody else can control the credit union once it exists in a principled position, which is, you know, really underpinning the organization, and really and truly once it's in compliance with all laws and regulations that exist. So that's an important part of it. But then we go to member economic participation. What is member economic participation? Basically, puts your money where your mouth is. So in other words, this is your organization. You have to remember that the credit union is yours. You own this organization. This is your business. So therefore, you have to participate economically. And what does participating economically mean? You save there, you borrow there, You invest there. Because at the end of the day, anything emerging from the organization, which is your business, redounds to you, the member economic participation. You have to participate in the organization. So it's not just about going there and getting money. It's also about engaging the organization to make sure that, you're able to generate revenue, generate surplus. And I know you all would enjoy this, generate dividends as well, anything for, because it redounds to the members, it comes back to you. Then we have concern for community. Now, community exists in two paradigms. A community could be geographic, let's say the San Fernando area, the San Fernando community, but it could also be demographic. So it could actually emerge from an organization, a particular group, that has a particular demographic. So it belongs to either geography or demography. And wherever it exists from, the organization must be concerned for the well-being of that organization. You have to remain concerned for it. And of course, education, training, and information. It's important, as you are here today, that you continue to receive this kind of education. You have to understand the philosophy. We have to know what this is about. And you have to embrace it. A lot of times we get involved in things and we're not too sure if you're here, if you're there, you're not too sure if it's your business. But one of the things I always say, mind your own business. This is your business. Cooperators, lockdown, people who would be interested in becoming members, people who are members, know this is business and this is your business. So MYOB, mind your own business. How you do that? You learn more about it. So be open to education, training, and information. Just as this initiative is here this evening, a very laudable initiative and one that educates the membership of the credit union, the members of the community. And it's really what it's about. So, of course, this is another illustration of the 7 cooperative principles: voluntary and open membership again, democratic member control, member economic participation, autonomy and independence, education, training and information, cooperation among cooperatives, and of course, concern for community. But then, in addition to the principles, we have what we refer to as the cooperative values. So, in addition to being principled, your credit union is also a values-based organization. And I always like to put this into a quiz, for persons to win something afterwards. So when they look at the values and the values espoused by a credit union, we look at self-responsibility. So here what? This is your business. You are responsible for this because this is your own, your family. You have to be responsible for your business. Then we go to solidarity, which is something which you talk about. There must be the collective. There must be solidarity, about decision making. There must be solidarity about, moving the organization forward. And this is a strong point. There must be solidarity about succession. There must be solidarity about succession. The next generation of cooperators. We have to come together, and as a movement, probably as a unit, SFCC, you know the direction you want to take your organization in. I mean, and do that on the basis of solidarity. Where, and I always say, where you see organization in the next 20 years. So by 2040, someone who is born in 2020 would be 21 years of age. And that person who referred to earlier, who was born in the year 2000, would be 41 years of age. And just at 20 years to your age now, what do you want to see? Equity. And I'll put up something on equity and equality, a picture that always, is always very interesting to what this discussion is. And equity is something very important, and we must make sure through the structure of the cooperative that people enjoy equity. That's an important value of the cooperative movement and of credit unionism, that people can enjoy equity being a part of this organization. Of course, democracy. You must be allowed to practice your democratic rights. Something we take for granted. So an annual general meeting must not just be about your dividends, the refreshments, and the token. And I think, this era of this new normal where we are doing virtual meetings, that people have come more and more to realize that, hey, this is something that we really need to be more cognizant of and aware of when we really engage in our credit union. Because now what we are really faced with is a situation where you sit in front of a computer, you receive the reports, or you're on your mobile phone, or you're on your tablet, you receive reports, and you receive the various nominees and nominations, and you have to exercise the democratic right. So what this time has done has really trimmed the fat, and we're down to the basics now. So a meeting is now in a virtual space, and it really comes down to a few things in the meeting. Of course, accountability through the reporting, decision making through, moving resolutions, but also exercising your democratic rights. Exercising your democratic rights. Very important in terms of the values. And we have pioneers that have worked on this to get us here. So, of course, we also have equality. We dealt with equity on top. But then we have equality, and, it's interesting, everyone here has a mass. So it don't matter, what you bring to the table, $1 million, 10,000 shares, 1 share. Equality. Everyone is entitled to equal treatment. As an organization, you have to remember this. Now, a lot of people may not be in the organization, but they engage the organization from time to time. Equality is an important tenet, and a value of this type of organization. And of course, it's about self-help. We going back to the Rothschild pioneers, you had to help yourself. It's no longer about looking for handouts. It's about helping yourself to become better, and by so doing, contribute to your business, so that the generation that will come in the future will be able to enjoy those benefits. So, of course, again, self-responsibility, solidarity, equity, democracy, equality, and self-help. All right, and this was something important to me. All right, because we have looked at the cooperative principles and values. We have done it from the position of the first industrial revolution. All right, and this is something that that kind of excites me, because you look at the industrial revolution timeline, and you see from the early days they were looking at, from that first industrial revolution around 1784, where it was about mechanization, as I said, steam power, the weaving loom, so cotton and weaving, and they started to make those clothes and those things. Moved to 1870, remember, to the early 1700s to late 1800s, 1900. Around 1870, mass production, assembly line, and electrical energy were introduced. Termed that the second, industrial revolution. And then around 1969, we had what was now referred to as the third industrial revolution, where automation was introduced, where computers were introduced, and electronics. But then now, what do we have today? Cyber-physical systems, the Internet of Things, IoTs as it's referred to, and networks. And they're calling that now the fourth industrial revolution. A very interesting time to be alive, to exist. This is the fourth industrial revolution. And why I'm pinning that is really because we see what emerged from the first industrial revolution, that people were able to survive mainly through collectivism, collaboration, camaraderie, and collective responsibility. Those Rothschild pioneers devised what we still practice today and know as the cooperative principles and values, of course, being refined along the way by the International Cooperative Alliance. But those principles, it's very interesting, emerging from those early days, still exist. So we are in what we call now the fourth industrial revolution. And I always like to share this story of the fourth industrial revolution. the fourth industrial revolution, ladies and gentlemen, fellow cooperators. That is where they say we are right now, the fourth industrial revolution. And you know, what does that revolution really, you know, do again, and what it's bringing to the to the table, you know? Once again, it's the introduction of technology. So when you see the technology being introduced once again to humanity, and you see they talk about you want to avoid things like joblessness and you know, low productivity. What does it mean? You know, we had, you know, I always like to draw this reference, you know, that in the 80s, you know, I was exposed to things like the Jetsons and Dick Tracy, where you would see he would take a phone call on his watch, and I would be so intrigued. I said, wow. I said, Dick Tracy, you know, this thing I might never see it in my lifetime. You know, the Jetsons had a robot for a maid. You know, I said, wow. You know, a floppy disk was something revolutionary. You know, it went from floppy disk to CDs, and now we have streams. And we're in what we call now the fourth industrial revolution, where we deal with cyber physical systems. So it's about, you know, connecting, you know, what is in the cyber world with, you know, the physical world. You know, so you know, they talk about the cyberspace, but cyberspace is actually meeting humanity. If you would see the video, you would see a man running with a mechanical dog, you know, so that might be a friend. You know, I've seen ads where, you know, you set a robot to greet you in the morning, to tell you good night, to welcome you home, you know, and that is the kind of engagement, you know. But now we are in this fourth industrial revolution, and we are faced by a global pandemic too. And some research last year indicated that the global pandemic, this COVID-19, has actually pushed the world 5 years ahead of where it would have been in terms of accessing technology. And you would know that, you know, remote work or work from home was something that was always being explored, something that couldn't be done, you know, or people are recommending doing pros and cons. And even schools, you know, school is being done remotely now. But how easy will it be to backtrack? After children have explored possibilities of going to school online, of having birthday limes online, of attending carnival parties and, as we say locally, fetes online, how you get them back to that virtual space? Now, strange enough, we who experience the physical mingling and interaction would say, nah, this can't last forever. But then think about someone who doesn't know about anything else. And that is what they know. Now I want to juxtapose that against your credit union and the credit union movement. Be thinking about that engagement moving forward. The second thing that I wanted to think about is really, we have a philosophy that was birthed in the modern era, in the first industrial revolution. And we're still talking about the impact of technology in a fourth industrial revolution on humanity and on livelihood. To think about where we really need to be, and if that philosophy remains relevant to what we do today. So of course, I love to show the jump where the dawn of the industrial revolution is, from that first steam engineering to the second revolution, where you had the advent of the assembly line, and a number of management theories and philosophy was birthed around that time. So the third element of computing, internet, nuclear energy, and then it had the dawn of the fourth industrial revolution. So we see things like cloud computing. So before, you serve it on a floppy disk, then you back it up on your server, and now you're backing it up in the cloud. Where is the cloud? So think about it. Think about it. You're exercising a democratic right, and you're thinking about your cooperative principles. I mean, today it's good that we have education, training, and information. And this is taking place somewhere in the cloud, you know. This is taking place somewhere in the cloud. We online, but you know, it's been recorded somewhere in the cloud. And that brings us to things like an augmented reality. What is real? What is not? So reality has to change. And some of the things we're speaking about with that change, let's look at meetings. So no longer can a meeting be defined as where all persons are located in the same physical space at the same time. It may have to be reworded to an event which led to the exchange of ideas on XYZ issues, because persons could be in Malaysia, they could be in Australia, they could be in Singapore, they could be in Russia, they could be in the United States, they could be in Tobago, they could be in Trinidad, and everyone is in the same meeting. So it's an augmented reality. Just a few points. Multi-level customer interaction and profiling. A lot of people, you know, you would hear now in the area of compliance, you hear about KYCs. So, you know your customer. But credit unions, do you know your member? Members, do you know your credit union? And how is that translating to tangible benefits for you? Whether as a credit union, as an organization, or the member as an individual. So we need to position, and these things impact our philosophy, that self-responsibility, that self-help, that democratic practice. And even if you go to the principles, that voluntary and open membership, that concern for community. Where does the community exist now? Is the community online? Is the community offline? Is the community geographic? Is the community demographic? So you see, it's expanding the parameters of the philosophical underpinnings. And as we move toward the future, we have to be aware of it. And just to touch on some other things, the IoT platforms, it's an Internet of Things. You know, that's another discussion. You know, you call it the IoT. So the IoT platforms, that Internet of Things, you know, of course, mobile devices whereas a mainframe computer back in the early days of computing used to be as big as a house. They got it as small as a room, and now it's as simple and small as in your pocket, and it gets even smaller, the chip size. And in some cases, it's just a stream. So that's how simple it's coming now. So the mobile devices, you know, you have location detection technologies, advanced human machine interfaces, 3D printing, smart sensors, it works, and even big data analytics. This is where it has led us. So, and just some things based on some research you were saying, and this was by 2020. I got this information in late 2019, you know, and they were forecasting and did not even have the impact when the research was done on what would be happening. And they say by 2020, 85% of brand experience will occur without human interaction. Interesting. And I think it's way more than 85. Just to show you, how volatile information is in our modern society. Here the next thing, multi or omni-channel presence will be the driving force of the customer experience. Now, if you didn't before, now you know. So I used to be averse to doing anything online with my credit card about, putting my information out there. But basically, now you really don't have a choice, you know. So that multi on the omni-channel presence will be the driving force of the customer experience. And think about the member experience as a credit union, where it's about concern for community, it's about education, training, and information. We're speaking about the principles here. It's about member economic participation. How do we stay true to our principles in a modern and evolving society? Very interesting. All right, and they say by 2020, a customer will manage 85% of the relationship with an enterprise without interacting with a human. This was prior to 2020. 2020 has come, 2020 has gone. And in some cases, 100% of the relationship with an enterprise is without human interaction. So let's think about it. Where we have the collective as the solution, and we're not able to get together physically. So how do we approach that? Remain true to our principles, engage our community, allow members to practice their democratic rights, open membership for people to come in voluntarily and remain autonomous and independent. If we cannot come together physically, and peg that against a succeeding generation who really will not have any interest in coming together, because as far as they are concerned, everything can be done virtually. It's an augmented reality, ladies and gentlemen. So, I like this in terms of the millennial. I got this meme, and they say, there's this 40, the meme, you see no evil, hear no evil, you speak no evil. But then the 40, he sees some of the first three, which is him here. And they see what he has in his hand. He sees nobody, he hears nobody, he speaks to nobody. So, That's the new paradigm, the new the shifting paradigm. That it's the largest community that exists across the history of the world. It's the online community. And it's a community that is not connected physically, but otherwise an augmented reality. And there are people who coming into that. The next thing that the philosophy, right, and that credit unions will struggle with to be relevant, right? I think I see the 2020 minutes, yes. So let me go to the 2020 minutes. All right. So would be to carve out a space in each minute of every day. Now remember, we built on a philosophy. We built on this this collective nature of supporting one another, of helping one another to be better. And really moving forward into different realms while holding on to our traditions. Now, this is not a discussion that has escaped contemporary talk within the credit union movement, but it is one where we have to be deliberate. It must be intentional to get people to engage their credit union continually. Because in 2019, this was an internet minute. So I'm going to the 2020 internet minute, when Netflix has 764,000 hours watched. That is an internet minute, which means people just sit down binge watching. You know yourself. Google, Facebook, how much of a text sent, YouTube, App Store, Instagram, Twitter, Tinder, email, Twitch, TikTok. TikTok, 1,400. This isn't a minute. I'm not speaking about an entire day. So what you all can do is just work forward. Multiply how many minutes in an hour, right? How many hours in a day, right? How many days in a week, how many weeks in a year. And you're multiplying those things by these. That is 59 million messages sent across Messenger and WhatsApp. Okay? 1.1 million spent online every single minute of 2020. And I'm going even further. This wheel was released before the pandemic. This was released before the pandemic, where people who never believed they would be online now as an online presence. So I wait with bated breath for the 2021 internet minutes. As you would see in prior years, in 2019, a lot of the things here didn't exist. And I'll just point out on TikTok. And TikTok has grown immensely through the pandemic. And why am I bringing this point to you? I bring this point to show that within here, the credit union has to position itself to remain relevant. Because with all these transactions happening, Where can the credit union get in? That $1.1 million spent online. How many of that money being spent is after engagement with a credit union? Of these 194,444 tweets or people tweeting, how many are doing that with a credit union? To engage your community and show concern for your community. Instagram posts, the email sent, 190 million emails sent every minute. Think about that engagement. All right. And then now, I come to a real battle. And this is, this is where it's trending. And this element of the discussion is really about, what the trends are when it comes to, the credit unions and the trends which have been observed coming out of coming into the 2000s and moving towards 2020 and 2030. And then also we had this global pandemic. So what are the socioeconomic trends we have been observing? And we'll also look at the technology trends that we have been observing. So there is rising income volatility. Incomes are becoming, more and more volatile. How are they becoming volatile? What we have observed, the trends, the socioeconomic trends, is that there is a growing gig economy, GIG, gig economy. So there was an era, all right, and I refer to them as the Gen X, the Gen Ys. I mean, coming to the Gen Ys and the millennials, there was a growing change where people really went into gigs. It wasn't really about, the baby boomer era and the Gen X era, where people would look for that job security and sit in a job for 20, 30, 40 years, you understand, and work towards a pension and a gratuity, and and look to retire comfortably, and then begin to travel and use retirement to do everything that you wanted to do. No, there's rising income volatility. Incomes are becoming more and more volatile. And then what continues to contribute to that too is that, in addition to more and more getting into the gig economy and gig work, right? Just taking on gigs. It's really, and it's a flatter world. It's a borderless society and economy we are now. So of course, it's no longer about one particular territory you're competing with again. It's across the globe. So incomes face global comparisons now, basically. So those are the socioeconomic trends we see. And then you have the two tails, the concentrated need among the young and the elderly. It's a real interesting disparity because we have an aged population which are forcing plenty countries to extend the retirement age, because we basically have people living longer, which they call now the silver economy. And then now you have a young generation who is becoming increasingly demanding. And as some people say, bold-faced. They get bold-faced. They expect certain things. They expect a certain service. They expect certain standards and they demand it. So you have two tails, I like to say it's two tails wagging the dog. So as a credit union, you're faced with this, a growing silver economy and a growing, young adult and youth membership. So now the demand now will span those. Now at the same time, you're trying to be member centric. You want to be voluntary and open. You want to exercise, you want to allow people to exercise their democratic rights because it's about democratic member control. So let's look at the democratic member control in a two-tailed society. So when you have in a two-tailed organization, so we are now into this global pandemic. We cannot gather. So the likelihood of having in-person EGMs is literally obliterated. It's non-existent. It may not come back in the foreseeable future. Who is comfortable with the technology? You would find younger people would be comfortable with the technology on their cell phone, on their tablet. So even if they choose to sit on a laptop or in front of the desktop, they find they are born into it. So if the credit union decides, to have an online EGM, if they decide to do business online, share statements, share information, do loans online, they can cater for that. However, you have now a growing elderly population as well who will be challenged. So now there is a disparity. How do you cater for both and allow both to be satisfied? Staying true and loyal to your philosophy, but seeking to satisfy members' needs. And it's a discussion you need to take strategically and take it to the board level. Then you have inequality. Now remember we talk about that cooperative value, which is equality. But now you're seeing the socio-economic trend of inequality. Inequality in terms of income, inequality in terms of wealth, and inequality in terms of access. There's a lot of discussion about financial inclusion and social inclusion now because persons are increasingly being denied access to certain services and to certain rights. Not really intentionally, but in most cases because of circumstances and external forces. So inequalities are growing socioeconomic trend. And then what you see happening as well, credit union growth and consolidation. You would know some people are consolidating what they do, looking at credit union growth and consolidation. They wrap it up. They're getting smaller, they're getting more focused, and they don't need as many credit unions because it's really basically about the service. And especially when catering to a community and the community can just be online. So it's no longer geographic or demographic. It's about, another or graphic, I should say. How do we do that? And then there's the precarious nature of work as well. I want to share this video for go on. Right, just to get an opportunity to take a breath. I know sometimes the information is a lot. Sometimes we just a stretch our leg and yes, excellent, good. Yeah, and one of the reasons I always like to bring that into the mix, and we'll see another one later, would be that inequality we spoke about. You know, that precarious nature of work, that rising income volatility, that two tails animal that you're facing coming out of the socio-economic trends, and then tying that to the technology trends. And I always find that video instructive when it comes to marrying all the elements, the socio-economic trends with the technology trends. Access on the go. You have voice and video anyway. You're going to voice and video. Not too sure about Trinidad and Tobago and this, but around the world, there is a disappearing car owner as transportation becomes simpler and easier. The next technological trend is that it's really all about the data. It's all about the data. So you would see now there's a big discussion about people migrating out of WhatsApp into Telegram because there is a notion that the Facebook and WhatsApp people, quote unquote, want to take your information and use it for their benefit in a space where you really not aware but you're being exploited. So it's really all about the data now. So it's no longer about, you know, how this would work. These organizations are wary of how it will work because it's really all about the data. So credit unions, SFCCU, whoever is tuned in, know it's all about the data. And of course, payments are at the center of everything you do. So even if they tell you you have a free subscription, they still ask for your credit card. Nice. So payments being at the center, what does that mean for you as a credit union? Now, this is just a pictorial representation because for you to actually be privy to all the information, you would have to come to the Cipriani College of Labor and Cooperative Studies, sit in one of the classes, or two or three, for, to do a certificate in credit union management or any one of our other offerings to really receive, the full Monty of what we have to offer. But in these 2 hours, it will be really a teaser as so what. So those socioeconomic trends and technology trends that we now spoke about, added to evolving regulatory structures, more and more you are seeing regulatory structures evolving. And now you are adding another regulatory change to the ecosystem. And it's really about governing in a virtual space. That governance includes having your statutory annual general meeting for members and allowing them to exercise their democratic rights in a virtual space. Very instructive and very important. How do you do that? And ensure that members' rights are not infringed. How do you do that? And allow the cooperative philosophy and principles to be effectively practiced. And when we can get to marrying the socioeconomic trends with the evolving regulatory structures, we will get closer to the 21st century minded credit union. And it has to be the 21st century minded credit union. And why is it so minded? Because it's about shaping and bending the mind to the 21st century. And there's nothing, it will not be stagnant. It will not retain the same structure and shape because the regulatory structures are evolving and socio-economic and technology trends will be changing. So we have to be wary of those changes and how it impacts us. And then I like to talk about value. Value for members. Traditionally, your value has been quality plus service over your cost. As you move forward, you have to remember, as an organization, we have to remain relevant. We have to become 21st century minded. We have to understand that we have philosophical underpinnings. Then we measure our value. Very important. So, as we look to wrap up, the future influences the present just as much as the past. This is a quote by Friedrich Nietzsche. But it's a very, I can't say I know the individual, but the quote is very instructive. The future influences the present just as much as the past. We have a very, very tangible example in the Industrial Revolution examples. So even when we speak to the 5th and the 6th Industrial Revolutions, if we are fortunate enough to see that in our lifetimes, it would be the impact of technology on human beings, the existence, and their reaction to bring about that change. So the future influences the present just as much as the past influences the present. So always strive to be a success. Strive not to be a success, but rather to be of value. So strive not to be a success, but rather to be of value. It doesn't make any sense. You just boast of your success when you do not bring value to people's lives. And of course, the future is something we create, not just what we enter. So the relevance of credit unions in the future has to be something that we create. It must not simply be about us just reaching there and entering something. This is our business. This is what we have created. And this is what the future depends on us to create for the next generation. Okay? So, with that, I would really like to thank the San Fernando, my bad, the SFCCU Credit Union for, really engaging the college. And of course, as you would know, this is one part of a series, that you can come and be a part of. Today we dealt with understanding principles, philosophies, and relevancy of credit unions. Next week, we'll be looking at understanding human resources, job evaluation, and job analysis, where it will get even more granular. And we'll be looking at, today we dealt with the wide approach, the organization, the business of a credit union, the philosophical underpinnings, how relevant it is, and then we're looking at next week, please God, understanding human resources, the job evaluation, job analysis. And then, of course, we deal with the micro matters for you all as well. Understanding basic financials, profit and loss statement, balance sheet and budgets coming up on the 4th of February. And then we also have some input. We'll have a CUNA presentation, CUNA wills and probates on the 11th. And of course, also looking at understanding industrial revolution, Industrial Relations and recognized majority unions on the 18th of February 2021. All right, so very happy to be a part of it. Excellent, 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 excellent. All right, so just check in, great, 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 great. So just looking, yes. So I see Candice has informed of the upcoming sessions. And of course, what I would like to encourage, there is a form, a registration form. I encourage you to share the registration form, to encourage persons to come on board. I hope you really enjoyed the session. I hope it has been as really inspiring to you as it was for me. And believe me, this is just something I love doing, something I look forward to. I really believe that the credit union movement is one of the greatest things that exist, and the potential really, really harnessed and resides within us as the collective. And once we continue to work together collectively, we are limitless in what we can achieve. So I am looking for any questions. Great. Thank you, Trisha, for opening eyes to see how important the credit union is in the world today. Yes, it's very important that we recognize the relevance of credit unions. A lot of people, really do not appreciate how important the credit union movement is towards for a lot of issues in society, including financial inclusion. The World Council of Credit Unions has, really focused in the last 3 to 5 years on two major areas, and they are financial inclusion and digitalization. And, we are really in a space where that is becoming more and more important. Financial inclusion arose particularly with the migration issues and persons having to leave their homelands and venture to other spaces for a number of reasons, including personal security, including war-ravaged lands, including political instability, even in Trinidad and Tobago, where we have been receiving a lot of our Venezuelan neighbors within recent times. And even in that perspective, because Venezuelans went to other South American, Latin American, and Caribbean territories. And it was very instructive that the World Council of Credit Unions implored, that drive towards financial inclusion in order to empower those persons, to survive and continue to enjoy, that social upliftment. Yes. So great, 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 great. Fantastic. All right, so as we continue to engage over the number of weeks, we will also be able to share some information coming out of the Cipriani College of Labor and Cooperative Studies. We have our introductory programs, which we call the 10 Saturday programs, beginning in February, on the 6th of February. So that information will also be shared with you, via email, and while you continue to participate here. So on that note, not seeing any questions, and you're being fully briefed on the upcoming events, we look forward to having you next week, Thursday, for the presentation on understanding human resources, job evaluation, and job analysis share it. It's important. Remember, this is a philosophical underpinning education, training, and information. You never have too much information. So, especially as credit unionists, we look forward to seeing you here next week. So, thank you very much. You will continue to keep safe, be safe, be safe. I implore you to be safe in this time as we continue to move our organization forward and become more 21st century minded and cooperatively minded. So, thank you very much and do take care.